This is the Rebel Author Podcast, where we talk about books, business, and occasionally bad words. Hello Rebels, and welcome to episode 280 of the Rebel Author Podcast. Today I'm talking to Rebecca Faith Heyman all about editing and how to turn your writing into literary gold. There were no comments on last week's episode, but I just want to remind you that my friend Ines Johnson's Page Turner Pacing Kickstarter is live. So if you want to go and check that out, I will leave a link in the show notes. And also, our Girl Games Kickstarter is rocking up to the start date of 4th of March, and it is exceptional. I can't honestly believe the quality of the books that we have this time. I'm so bloody excited for this one to start. We've got a big surprise for readers as well that we haven't told anybody about yet, and we're going to do a big I've got a secret kind of reveal heading up towards the campaign. So if you are looking for marketing ideas, please do come and follow me on Instagram and have a look at what we are doing as a team to promote this Kickstarter. I've got my fingers crossed and I'm trying not to get too excited, but I've got a very good feeling for this one. We're in personal news and updates. Oh my God. I don't even know where to begin. Life choices, people. We all make them. And there are consequences to those life choices. Look, I thought I was through the growth. I'm not, okay? I'm still in growing pains. So I think I have told you this already, although I forget because there is so much going on. I don't know what I have said and what I have not. On Friday, so today is Wednesday the 29th of January. On Friday, the 31st of January, I pick up the keys to a mini warehouse, a very, very mini. It's more like an office. It's sort of like a hybrid office come light industrial unit. It's in a brick building, but it's sort of structured a bit like a warehouse. And essentially, I am going to be setting up a fulfillment unit so that we can do things like merchandise, so that we can have more customization of what we send our customers. So for example, we'll be able to do things like return customer rewards, collect points and you'll get discounts or you'll get freebies or whatever. We can, package things slightly differently. And that's really important to me, to be able to please customers and improve customer retention and just the customer experience in general. But also because I want to be able to add on different products. I want to have more flexibility with what we send out. We've got these gorgeous art prints that I want to be able to do art packs with. I've been asked literally daily for art packs, because people want the character art or the character stickers, and we can't do that in a print on demand system. So we have placed an order for 3,500 books. Plus, I am still using my other printers. At the moment, we're only doing print runs for paperbacks. The hardbacks I'm leaving at the moment just because they don't sell as much as the paperbacks. So we're starting smaller because I don't want to just, spend too much money, invest too much, and then, end up in a sticky situation. So we're starting with just paperbacks at the moment. And I'm still doing print on demand hardbacks, but we are going to be fulfilling everything within a couple of weeks. So the delivery of the books comes on the 10th. My hardbacks, which are still print on demand, I'm getting on the 11th. And it's going to take about a week, and then we should be moving into fulfillment ourselves, which does mean that for the next few weeks, my time is still pretty restricted. I am not wild about that, but I'm also aware that it's sort of short-term pain so that we can set a system in place where I can then back off a little bit in order to be able to be more creative. Now, that said, having finished the Kickstarter, having signed the lease on this property and done all the paperwork for that, all of a sudden my creativity came back, and I was sat outside a coding club because my kid wants to learn to code, and just in the car, there was no Wi-Fi, no internet, therefore no notifications, and I outlined a novella in like an hour, like the entire thing. And I was like, oh my God, yes, I do still know how to, outline. I still do know how to be creative. And it was nice that yesterday I managed to get some words, and I haven't today, but I think I will again tomorrow. This move has highlighted that there are a lot of gaps in my business knowledge. Joanna Penn very kindly reminded me that this is not an indie author business model. It is an e-commerce model. It is a, product-based business model, which means it's not knowledge that the indie author community has, and therefore I need to go and get that knowledge from somewhere. And she's absolutely right, as usual. She always is. This is why I adore her. But she's right, and I do. And so I'm trying to get that knowledge now. And I'll be totally frank. I had a bit of a meltdown yesterday because I was wildly overwhelmed. When you are in a growth period is natural, right? It's natural to feel outside of your comfort zone when you don't have knowledge that you need in order to make sure that your business functions appropriately. So yeah, this is where I am. I am looking at what the structure of the business looks like going forward. I'm always trying to keep in mind that creativity comes first. I am a writer first and foremost. But I also am trying to be aware that I need to look after my physical body. I had a bit of a meltdown and then went to the gym, and lo and behold, I felt better. Surprising fucking nobody. So yeah, it's just a lot. It's so much going on, and I don't know what else to tell you. Oh yes, I do. There's one other thing that I've kind of learned this week, and that is why I read in my genre. I had kind of stopped reading anything or like reading in my genre, and I was just struggling to get into anything. And I think the reason is because of just how much was going on. However, I got to the point with the outline for Architecty where I was like, I can't do this. I don't know the story. I don't know what this story is, blah, blah, blah. And yet every time I would speak to a writer friend, they'd be like, you've just told me the story. Like, there's clearly a story there. And I'd be like, but I don't know, like blah, blah, blah. And anyway, so I found this person on TikTok who wrote their thesis on dark academia. And she basically did this breakdown of all of the tropes, kind of all of the thematic elements. And I was like, oh my God, yes, like this is everything that I love. This is why I wanted to do this. And then when I went back to look at my outline, I was like, yeah, I have elements of this, but I didn't have everything in it. So I was like, okay, I need to go back and read more. And so I went back to this girl's TikTok, and she gave like a list of sort of pillar dark academia books and a list of sort of more new ones. And I was like, oh my God, I already have all of these books on my shelf, because past me let competition go and do the market research. So of course I already knew which books are in there. Anyway, I'm just a wally. And so I started reading them. And I'm reading a anthology of dark academia shorts by all of the best kind of dark academia, best-selling dark academia authors in the market. And lo and behold, I was able to very quickly deconstruct, but for trope and genre rather than craft, which is what I normally do. So I approached my deconstruction differently. And it's enabled me to kind of pick out all of those thematic elements and all of the tropes and how they play out in a short kind of story. And that's enabled me to lift it out very quickly and then go, okay, yes, this was what was missing, or that was what was missing. So now I feel like what it's done is giving me the certainty that what I'm outlining is now far more center market. And also, it's reminded me of all the elements that I love about dark academia. That's why I wanted to write this, right? Like, it's because I love this genre. And so, yeah, like, it's given me certainty. And that is why I read in genre. And I just needed that reminder this week and the permission to go and do that reading. So yeah, that was another one of my lessons. Quite a lot this week going on in the brain of Sasha. But what I am really pleased is that I am back writing. And yes, I'm a little bit sad that I'm not writing Architecty right now, but also I am aware that it's still percolating, and every single time I give it another day, I come up with another really good idea. And I'm like, oh my God, of course, how could I have missed this? Of course, this is the thing that needs to be in the outline. So it's awareness and like that kindness to my brain to just say, yeah, it's fine to take another day. So I'm working on this novella instead, and delighted that I'm getting words, albeit a little bit slower than I want to, but the creativity is back. I'm taking a bit of a pause this weekend. It will take me all weekend and probably a couple of days next week to get the unit set up, then a few days hopefully to get words, and then another couple of days when we get the book delivery, another couple of days integrating with the shipping company, and then hopefully we will be up and running. I have got my whole family chipping in to help with packing for the first month, and then we are going to be looking at bringing somebody into the team to help do that. So big, exciting things. I can't bloody wait for the end of the year lessons learned episode. It's gonna be a wild ride this year. The Rebel of the Week this week is Gigi. Gigi says, Arwen was my pet rabbit. We already had a rabbit, Tiger, and wanted him to have a companion. They got along so well and were very happy together, but now sadly both have crossed the Rainbow Bridge and I miss them greatly. They were house trained and free to roam, both indoors and in the back garden. We thought everything was rabbit proof until Arwen outsmarted us. Our veggie garden had always kept Tiger out, but Arwen was another story. At first, I only noticed suspicious teeth marks on my pumpkins. She avoided the garden when we were outside, so I spied through the blinds. That's when I saw her jumping through the gaps in the fence. Tiger tried to copy her, but never quite figured it out. We covered the gaps with plastic wire. She pulled it down with her teeth. We tried metal wire. She launched herself off the wall and over. She was like a little ninja. Eventually, we had to make the fence higher. It finally worked, but of course, I still gave her the best veggies, and she found plenty of other ways to cause mischief for years to come. And we have pictures of both Arwen in her allowed part of the garden and one of her cuddling with Tiger. So we will make sure that those are, and I've just seen them. Oh my God, they're adorable. And we'll make sure those go in the show notes as well. So thank you very much. We are super low on Rebel stories. I feel like I say this periodically, but we are almost out. We literally are down to the wire. So if you have a Rebel story, I would be very grateful if you would send it in. It can be anything. It doesn't even have to be your Rebel story. Maybe it's a cousin or a sibling or a parent or an aunt or an uncle or a friend or a dog or a rabbit. It can be any kind of story, something big, something small, or something in between. You can email your story to Becca over on rebelauthorpodcast@gmail.com. Patrons this week, welcome and thank you to Lexi Lee, what a cool name, and Rosanna Atreya. A huge thank you to all of my existing patrons, especially as I've been a little bit distant in Slack this past week because I've been in utter chaos. But we do have another Poison and Parlay, as we are now calling it, where we have our monthly catch-ups, chit-chat, chin-wags, seeing how everyone is, answering questions, having a cuppa, and a proper little chinwag. And our next one is on 20th of February at 4 p.m. UK time. So if you want to join us for that or join our Slack group, then you can by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. This episode is sponsored by Kobo Writing Life, Kobo's free, fast and easy self-publishing platform. KWL was built by authors for authors, and their team of dedicated book lovers is always working hard to help you reach new readers around the world. Right now, digital books are reaching more people than ever, and libraries are becoming an integral part of that. In 2021, top digital library systems powered by Overdrive loaned 500 million books, an increase of 16% on 2020. That's 500 million book loans, which means a lot of happy readers. You can easily reach library readers through Kobo Writing Life. All you need to do is go to the rights and distribution section of your book, click Yes to Overdrive and enter a library price. Your book will then be available to librarians to purchase for multi-loan use, but also for a one-time checkout option. Distributing with KWL means you're not paying any aggregator fee and you'll earn 50% on every library sale. If you're interested in taking part in library promotions, email KWL's dedicated author care team at writinglife@kobo.com and they'll add you to their mailing list. And don't forget to tell your readers that they can now pick up your books in libraries. If you want to learn more about KWL, check out the Kobo Writing Life podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts, and find them on social. Create your free account today at kobo.com/writinglife. It from me this week. Let's get on with the episode. Hello and welcome to the Rebel Author Podcast. Today I'm joined by Rebecca Faith Heyman. Rebecca began her work as a freelance editor almost 20 years ago after completing her BA/MA in English and American Literature at New York University. She is the creator and founder of First Line Frenzy, an ongoing community learning project to help writers develop their craft. Rebecca is an advisor to the board of Readsy Inc. and the founder and director of The Work Conference. She believes that humour, honesty, and keen discernment are the foundations of good editorial work. Hello and welcome.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
No, thank you so much. So we met in Sweden, in Stockholm, which was amazing, absolutely fantastic conference to be a part of. And you did a whirlwind trip into Sweden from America, which for 4 days or something, wasn't it? So
it was less. I think we were only in Sweden for 36 hours, maybe a little bit more.
That is because wild.
My son's birthday was the same day the conference ended, but because of the time change, we were able to sort of travel back in time and have 2 August 26th. So we were able to do it.
That is wild, and serious dedication as well. I sort of flounced in and flounced back out, with my 1.5 hour flight.
I think on the way in, we traveled for, 24 hours straight because we had to obviously drive from Boston to New York to drop the kids with my in-laws, 2-hour trip to the airport, 8-hour trip to London, 3-hour layover, and then another 2 or 3 hours into Stockholm. And it was a little bananas.
That is wild. Well, before we kind of dive into our topic, would you like to tell everyone a little bit about your journey? Because you have an incredible career, an incredible set of clients, and an amazing job. So would you like to tell everyone about you?
Yes, I have the best job in the world for me. I mean, I always say I was born to do this. I dreamt of being an editor before I really knew what it was. I often say that when my peers were dreaming of being ballerinas and astronauts, I was hoarding, blank pads of paper and red pens. It was just always what I was destined to do. So there was never really a question in my mind about what I would study at college and grad school. And so when I came out of school, it just so happened to be the year the Kindle came to market. And so I was coming online both literally and figuratively at a time when authorship had suddenly become an open door phenomenon where the gatekeepers became decentralized for a lot of aspiring authors. And so, of course, in response, these websites for freelancers popped up, and I started just working directly with authors right away. There is a now defunct website that was called Elance at the time, with, tens of thousands of editors globally. And I was their reigning queen. I was the #1 ranked editor globally for years. Once I fought for that spot, I kept it through a brilliant combination of hustle and skill. So that was sort of my training ground. And then thankfully, word of mouth spread, and I started working with authors further along in their journeys, a little less business manual platform books and more into fiction. And that's how I came to be.
Okay, so already a complete tangent, because there's something that I remember from Sweden now when I was listening to you talk. So complete tangent. Have you heard of Clifton Strengths?
No.
Oh, gutted. Right. So there is a kind of personality, well, they call it success coaching. And essentially, this guy, backed by like 28 million personality tests, it's like the most statistically valid personality profiling system in the world. He basically interviewed the top 1% in a bunch of industries, did qualitative analysis. Anyway, came up with these 34 strengths, and everybody has them just in a different order. And I would put money on the fact that you have my number one strength somewhere in your top 10, if not top 5. So that's why I'm asking. And I don't want to bias you in case you ever do the test. But
you have to tell me. I'm never going to do it. What is it?
I'm number one competition. And
but okay, we are the same if your number one competitor is also yourself.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, I have my second top strength is called achiever, and achiever competes with itself and competition competes with other people. But there are certain like things that you say, like, and I remembered in Sweden, I was like, this is why I loved her. This is why, because I make no apologies about being competitive. Like, I think like that is what life is about. Like, and so, yeah, I love that about you. And that's why I wanted to talk to you again.
It's funny because, I have 2 kids and they're both young elementary age kids. And when I talk to other parents, I always say I'm aiming for mediocrity for my children, because if they can be totally average but extraordinarily happy, I will have done my job as a mother. And we live in this culture of like elite children and, mastering subjects under the age of 10. And I really feel strongly that that's not the road to happiness. But when it comes to editing and literature, I have this fire to dominate my sport, and it is nowhere else really in my life. I think achievement is probably more my drug of choice than competition, because by and large, I sort of operate in a vacuum because I've worked for myself for so long, but I am always trying to get better on my own terms. It's part of what started the work conference. I was like, I wonder if I could do this.
But our whole industry is like that, right? Because that you are never really in competition with another author, because you as a singular author can never write enough books to satisfy like one reader's thing. So even though I am number one competition, I don't see anybody as a competitor, even in my like micro genre, but because they're not, because there is enough space for everybody to win and to succeed. So yeah, I'm like super pro, like and also in terms of Clifton Strengths, big C competition is not the same as like small C competitiveness.
Yes,
there's
that's
like
what
a
I was
difference. Yeah,
there's almost this more subtle, compassionate, I almost want to say feminine version of competition that has nothing to do with like exerting dominance. It's more about seeing what is possible and believing that you are capable of whatever that is.
Absolutely. Well, now we know we've got loads in common. Let's dive into kind of what you do. So for listeners who are maybe slightly newer to writing, can you just explain the big differences between the main types of editing? So developmental or story editing, whatever you want to call it, kind of the line editing, copy editing, and kind of proofreading. What are the main differences?
So developmental editing is big mind editing. It's narrative development, getting the biggest set pieces of a story in place, which is not to say it is not concerned with more microcosmic issues like theme and motif development and characterization, but we are not worried about line level functionality in a developmental edit. Then you have your 2 sort of big lifts on line level development, which are line editing and copy editing. These are often combined, especially in the freelance world. But if there is a distinction, it's that copy editing is line level mechanical and line editing is line level artistic. So I think that's the best distinction, but more and more often we're finding that these things happen simultaneously. It's very difficult to talk about one without the other. Why would you talk about syntax, like the order of words in a sentence, if you are not responding both to that sentence's grammar and its artfulness? It's almost impossible to have one without the other. And then, of course, proofreading is the dotting I's and crossing T's and catching typos. It's that last fine mesh sieve, cheesecloth situation.
How easy do you find it to separate the line level work from the big picture character and story stuff? Because I do feel like sometimes, we're told at the beginning of our journey, you should start with a developmental edit. But sometimes the quality of the prose isn't even good enough to do a story edit. So like where are those lines blurred? Like talk to me a little bit about that kind of experience for you.
So I think one factor here is that I have learned to separate these practices because I am only paid for one at a time. And that might sound cutthroat, but for a long time, my contracts for developmental work would say something like, 7-page editorial memo minimum. And I would end up delivering these 15, 16, 17-page editorial memos. And at some point, I was working 7 days a week. And I thought, hold on, aren't I the boss of me? What am I doing? And I had to train my brain to say, not your circus, not your monkeys. This is not a line level edit. So often I will look at line level in chapter 1 only to give my authors an idea of the work ahead, right? Because a developmental edit can feel like such a big lift that you think you're going to coast on the other side. And that is frequently not the case. So for me, looking at developmental, I work now on a device called a Remarkable, where I'm looking at a PDF that I can mark up.
Fave.
Oh my gosh, I am like obsessed with mine. Do you have the keyboard?
I do. And I'm absolutely devastated because I brought mine and like the 100 days expired and then they brought out the fucking color one. I was furious.
There's a color one?
There's a color one and it's only just come out. And I was like, but can I justify buying it again in the same year? I can't justify it.
I'm so happy with the keyboard. And as a very silly tangential aside, I saw one of the attendees in Sweden at the conference in Sweden with a Remarkable. And I said, oh, is that a Remarkable? And he was like, yeah. And I said, well, that's a really nice one. And he said, I work for the company. And I was like, if you would like to sponsor me ever, I am available to shill your product, which I love. I like stop people in cafes and I'm like, hey, is that a Remarkable? And they're like, yeah, it's very obviously a Remarkable. And I'm like, yeah, I have one too. Like, I feel like we're in a special club.
I have peer pressured a lot of people into buying them and not one regrets it. Not one.
So I have a hot tip for you, which is the King Wright pen, which you can get on Amazon for like $60 or something, is a far superior pen product to Remarkable's pen. I kept breaking Remarkable pens. Stop. Do you have it already?
No, but this is, so I don't, Stedler or Steedler?
Yeah,
the pencil. This is a Remarkable pencil. Like
this has the eraser on the back, which I love. It has the eraser and it takes the Remarkable nib, which I also like. And I love these. And they have a white one too. So that's
called King Wright.
King Wright. And it's on Amazon. Anyway, I'll stop selling things now. Welcome to our sponsored podcast by King Wright.
And Remarkable. Yeah.
Wishful thinking. So, right.
Yes. Okay.
Why is it hard to differentiate between developmental and line editing? I will say also, and I think we're going to talk about this later, when I see work that is too distracting at the line level to warrant developmental editing, I don't take on those clients. I think it's a disservice to both of us. So, my number one tip for all writers is to read. And I think the only way to develop some of the line level skills necessary for contemporary prose is to just read constantly and sort of fill yourself up with that good language.
Okay, another aside already. So as I have always been a reader. And I read a lot of books. I read probably between 100. Well, next year my goal is 150, but I usually read between 100 and 120 books a year, which is a lot for. Sometimes
I get tired because if I'm writing, it's also reading all day long. Do you
Yes.
ever struggle, like personally, to read when you've read all day long?
I love audiobooks.
Okay.
And so audiobooks have really saved me on that front because I'm a yarn crafter. Also, I love to crochet, all part of my like secret low key septuagenarian personality that's inside my younger facade. So I love to listen. And so that has really saved me. I also love to read with my eyes. So it, it doesn't, I never feel like literature is out of reach for me because after a long day of editing and writing, I will often listen first and then sometimes switch to a hardcover or ebook later in the day. But like you, I've been a lifetime reader. It has always been one of the great joys of my life.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't, I just can't. Sometimes I'm in a slump. Everybody has a book slump now and then where you just can't find that correct mood read.
Yeah.
But that's when I go back and, re-listen to India Holton or Tessa Dare or Susanna Clark or whatever, something that I know will speak to my soul. And then I'm off to the races again.
No, I love that. The more, as I sort of went from part-time to full-time, the more full-time I've got, the more audio I listen to. So I now listen to probably between 4 and 7 audiobooks a month on top of all the physical books that I'm reading, just because like it is a savior for me, like in that same way. But okay, so back to the topic. So many tangents. Back to the topic.
You never met her.
I know, right? So for those newer writers who may not be in the fortunate position that their books are selling, thousands and thousands of pounds worth of copies, what do they do on a tight budget when they may need all 3 types of edits and can't afford 3 types of edits? Is there any advice for them?
Yes. So I think the first step for authors, emerging authors, is to find a good quality cohort. There's no excuse anymore. The internet is a big place. And so you have to find other authors who are also starting out and whose work you like to read and whose opinions you respect. And they should be your first readers if you're on a budget. You should be exchanging reads. That's not a substitute for professional editorial work, but it is a good first step to start understanding your work from outside your own perspective, right? This is the most valuable piece of the editing pie in a lot of ways. So to condition yourself to be able to accept feedback, to understand how your words are landing with someone outside of your own brain, you can do this with beta readers. I think there are some great online tools for easing the line level execution of prose, right? So there's things like Grammarly. I don't use these things, so I can't recommend any of them specifically. But if we're on a budget and we need to make it work, the internet is here to help you for sure. I mean, AI is a huge topic, and I'm not really qualified to speak about it, but I know somewhere out there's a robot who can read your prose and tell you if it's legible. I mean, we're living in an age where that is becoming more possible. Now, can those kinds of services do the artistic side of things? No, but it's a good first step. And then I would say at some point, if you want other people to invest in your work by purchasing it, you will have to make some kind of investment in producing that product because your book is a product.
Okay. One of the things that you talk about a lot is first lines, and I'm sort of going to come to that in just a second. But I wanted to ask you, when you approach a manuscript, what are some of the red flags? So you mentioned earlier that there are manuscripts that you turn away or clients that you turn away. So for listeners who are thinking about approaching their first or maybe their second editor, what are the red flags they need to get rid of?
The first red flag that turns me off of accepting a project, it has nothing to do with the pages and everything to do with the tone of communication in the email inquiry you sent me.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I don't even open the pages if I can tell that you've sent the same email to 20 other people. I don't respond to mass emails. My website says very clearly the information I need in order to start assessing whether we're a good fit. And if you didn't bother reading that, I will not be bothering to read anything you send me. So like, do your research. I'm worth it. You're about to pay me a lot of money to do what I am best at in the world. Go to my website first, please. So that's my first red flag. If I sense that you picked my name out of a hat, no, thank you. That's a hard pass for me. When we start talking about pages, the quality of line level execution has to be tolerable for me. If I'm annoyed by your prose, if you've got 17 misused semicolons in the first 5 pages, I'm not a good fit for you because it's going to crush my soul. And you don't want an editor whose soul is withering inside of her body. She's not going to be very nice. So that's the next one. I love to see an awareness of the market. Like I can tell when I read your opening pages if you've read a book published in the last 5 years. And if I sense that you haven't, I don't think we're a good match because I want to work with authors who want working careers, right?
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. How has kind of tone, voice, pace, sentence structure changed in the market? Like how can you tell somebody has read current selling books?
Some of it is the tropes. Like we are entering, I'm going to talk about romantasy just because it's such like a hot ticket right now.
It's also what I write. So preach, baby.
So, and of course, you know this better than I do. I feel like we've gone through the looking glass on romantasy. And at this point, we are now inverting the tropes and we're seeing things like dreadful and assistant to the villain. And, what's that one?
I think
that evil, things like that, like where we're suddenly seeing the villain take a heroic stance.
I think 2 things are going to happen. I think the first thing that is going to happen is that we take from contemporary the darker romance. I think we're going to get darker fantasy romance. And the second thing I think is going to happen is the rise of Gothic. And I am seeing that quickly. Gothic romantasy and like, spoiler to everybody listening. I don't know when this is going out, but like that is what I'm writing next. And I'm so fucking excited because I am bang on trend. And I would place a lot of money that is the next big thing. You only have to look at the top 100. I checked this week, 4% of the top 100 were all Gothic romantasies. And like, that's saying something when it's, it's growing.
I will say also 100%, I think you're right. Part of the reason I think you're right is because contemporary romance has already gone witchy. And I was just talking to one of my romance authors who said, I'm thinking about writing a witchy romance. And I said, if your witch could easily be a baker or a bookshop owner, if you could just swap out witch for some other cozy thing, then no. I want my witches out for blood. Like stop with your cute witches. I'm out. So I think if you look at like Juno Dawson's work or something like that, where she's doing this amazing work with the Her Majesty's Royal Coven series, it's dark, it's queer, it's smart, it's political, it's current. And it is like sinking your teeth into just like the most delicious cake. It's so rich and well done and thoughtful. And I think that is what's coming. What I don't want is 800 Wuthering Heights retellings. Like, just shut it down. Okay. There's more to Gothic than the Brontes, but I hope that's where it's going. Right. I think part of what tips me off to a non-reading writer is a linguistic sense of navel gazing. Like, I know that might sound kooky, but I look for language that reaches out to me, like to fill the space between the page and my brain. There's prose that only turns in on itself. It's obsessed with its own poetry. It sacrifices meaning for perceived beauty. That kind of language excludes readers. And so I'm always looking for language that reaches out to me and says, hey, thanks for reading.
There's afterwards, I want to name drop a particular book that I'm thinking of that was on the, New York Times list for a really long time, but I won't because I can't do it publicly. But I will ask you about that after. But there is the saying that the average reading level ability is like a 9-year-old or an 11-year-old or something. That's what they say, isn't there? So you have to be writing that an 11-year-old, I mean, they were not going to be able to access my books, but you know what I mean? Like theoretically, they would have the capacity to be able to read it. So there is definitely something to be said in clarity in your words.
I think, yes, clarity, right? Like I don't want anybody to think that they have to dumb down their prose, because I think if anything, we're having a renaissance of adult readers who are ready for more, right? We know there's like an onboarding pipeline with romantasy and some contemporary romance, and then that spills over into some other stuff. And eventually people are becoming readers again. Readers who self-identified that way as children, and then adulthood happened and they lost touch with it. And now they're back and it's wonderful. But I do think that your clarity of purpose in writing has to be so crystalline, so just pristine and clear. And that purposefulness is part of what I look for as well. Like, why am I reading this? Why did you write it?
And that starts with line 1 and sentence 1, right? Okay, so you are an expert at first sentences. And funnily enough, I was in the back of your session listening, and you do what I do, which is to collect first sentences. I literally have a whole file of just first lines, because they are like, I always call it like, and this may be wrong, but I always say I can tell when somebody has almost copywritten their first sentence. And if it isn't, I usually put the book down. Like, I want to be hooked on the very first sentence. So what do we have to do? What does it really take to make a good first sentence? I mean, I know that's a $64 million question, but
if it's a $64 million question, then it's one I've been giving the answer to away for free for like over a decade. First Line Frenzy is a community learning project. And I want to say about first lines that, yes, they are important. I don't personally believe they're the be all end all of every project, but First Line Frenzy emerged because if we're going to look at only one line, we might as well choose the first one, right? Like, we might as well just get in there. I do think hooking your reader is important. I do think this can happen in line 1. I love to see conflict and character in line 1. You've got to hint at the mystery at the heart of your novel. And there's a mystery at the heart of every novel. So there has to be something enticing about line 1 that either gestures to the mystery or gestures to the conflict building around that mystery. In First Line Frenzy, we talk about the so what's next test, which is, what is your response to line 1? If it's so what, then it's not a good line. And if it's what's next, it's a great line. So sometimes it's just that simple. It's about inviting your reader in to continue reading. First lines are so complex, but also a great first line is so obvious that you think it's going to be a simple thing.
What are some of your favorites?
Just like random first lines?
Yeah, why not? So like, one that always sticks out to me is Leigh Bardugo's Six of Crows, which is Juiced had 2 problems, the moon and his moustache. And I'm like, that's conflict right there. The only thing that I feel let down about is that we don't really see the character again. Like, that whole first
that is true.
prologue kind of just vanishes into irrelevancy. But yeah, I love that first line.
It is a great first line. I have books right on my desk here. And so what I'm going to do is just grab one and we're going to look at it.
Oh my God, I love this.
See if it's good or not. Hold on. So this is Freya Marsk, A Marvelous Light. And now this is a 3-book series. This is only the first one.
It is. And the second one is queer as well. Sapphic.
They all are.
Yeah, no, I know. Sorry, I meant Sapphic. Yeah.
Yes, it is. So the first line here is, Reginald Gatling's doom found him beneath an oak tree on the last Sunday of a fast fading summer.
Ace.
No notes, right?
Ace.
Like, it's
Yes.
great. And it's great because it's very like this idea that doom belongs to someone. This possessive Reginald Gatling's doom is delicious. And then a doom that finds you is, I mean, come on, we're hooked forever now. And so
well, she's given an intangible thing agency, right?
Yes, which we love. And now I have, what else? I haven't opened this one. I just went deeply down the rabbit hole of TJ Klune's Green Creek series. And if you love a gay werewolf and you haven't read the Green Creek series, then I've got great news for you. It's going to keep you on the hook. The audio is fantastic.
I've read a lot of those ones though, and most of those make me cry. Oh my God. I sobbed so badly with joy. I could not see the page. Like, so I had to put
holding, for our listeners, The House in the Cerulean Sea. And let's just see what the first line is. I mean, I already know I'm going to love the book because I would follow TJ Klune into war at this point. So this is really interesting. It starts with dialogue, which is something I don't recommend. It says, "Oh dear," Linus Baker said, wiping the sweat from his brow. "This is most unusual." So typically, I don't recommend starting with dialogue because dialogue is inherently without context. It is a speech act. There's no setting in it. It's very hard to capture character in dialogue. We get a little bit more here because of the beat, right? Wiping the sweat from his brow. And of course, the second part of the dialogue is, "This is most unusual." So we do want to know, well, what's unusual? So, but that's not my favorite first line.
His other book, Under the Whispering Door, I think has a better first two lines. So it starts, "Patricia was crying. Wallace Price hated it when people cried." So like, grumpy, unlikable character, very typical first line from them, where they usually hate something that's completely, normally socially acceptable. So I quite like that one more than I do Cerulean Sea.
It's interesting because, someone once a year always asks me what I think of the first line of Pride and Prejudice. And I'm like, yeah, it's great. I don't know. What do you want me to say? There are great first lines that break all the rules. There are great first lines that follow all the rules. The idea of first line frenzy is not to be prescriptive per se, but it's to try to quantify what makes for intriguing language at the line level in a very short space of time. Yeah. And it's incredible how much we can extrapolate from each of these lines that people send in. And I have, like you, a list of thousands of lines that people have sent me over the years. I just recorded my 500th First Line Frenzy reel because I started putting First Line Frenzy on Instagram, I guess 2 years ago or something like that. So, I mean, we get great layers. There's a great line in my next batch that has no character, but it has an anthropomorphized house. It's a middle grade fantasy, and that's a great choice for that genre, to indicate a really specific place. It starts with a street address, and then it anthropomorphizes this house in a really creepy, fantastical way. And I loved it. So there are rules. There's throwing out the rules. I think what matters is that you grab your reader sort of by the throat and say, don't look away.
What are some mistakes you see?
I see so many mistakes. I think fact cakes are a big mistake. We have a bit of a lexicon of First Line Frenzy language. And the story of fact cake is that my best friend's sister-in-law was getting married. And the night before the wedding was a rehearsal dinner, and her wife-to-be got her a cake, and it said, "Tomorrow you will be my wife, period." And it was just a fact cake. It was a cake that was stating facts, And so a fact cake is all info, no heart.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Where's the emotion in that? I mean...
Like, I just I didn't see the cake, but I just kind of imagine it in Jill
it's almost
straw,
like Spock gave it to somebody, It's
just so funny. I mean, it's a well-meaning fact. So we see fact cakes. We can do better. Being boring, anything that starts with across time and space. I'm out. I'm already asleep. Anything that makes huge generalizations, right? Women everywhere, ... No thanks. Hard pass. I don't recommend starting with yes or no questions. Have you ever seen a bear wearing pants? Like, okay, no. Am I excluded from the rest now? I don't know. Being too in love with a metaphor that you've taken way too far in line one, I just get tired. I just can't, you know? And then I think, I guess the big one is being ignorant. If you're, casually misogynist first line gives me the ick, I'm out. I'm out. If you're putting it down on paper, you better make sure that you've really thought about it. And so that any lack of thoughtfulness, I think, is a big mistake.
Do you think there are some sort of first line techniques that we can also apply in other areas of our manuscripts?
Yes. So I don't think there is any such thing as a throwaway sentence in a novel. Like, I don't think readers can tolerate mediocrity anymore, which, let me say for the record, there are a lot of very successful mediocre books. I know that. There are very successful books with writing that would send me to an early grave. Okay. It doesn't mean we strive for the lowest common denominator. I think we should hold ourselves to a higher standard. So, the special music of a final line in a chapter that echoes in the space between that last line and the beginning of the next chapter, like, you can't sleep on that. There's no room to not care about that. So I think the carefulness that people bring to a first line should be applied forward universally.
Yes, I agree. And for me, I suppose for me, I also really, really think that what is your first line, if not an advert for the second line or the first paragraph or the first page, which is an advert for the second page, which is an advert for the third. So, the first chapter is an ad for the second chapter. Like, if you haven't got somebody, they will just put it down because there is enough content in the world now for people to just, and I suppose anyway. Okay, so following on from kind of the first line stuff and I guess mistakes or things that people shouldn't be doing, what do you see new authors doing in story in general that they shouldn't be? And how do you help them kind of overcome it?
The number one problem I see across all genres and across all levels of authorship, right? From my babies to like my author grandmothers who have been doing this forever, is not establishing the one true desire that propels a story forward. I have very strong feelings about this. And I taught about this in Sweden. And because of my conversation with you, I have been writing about it as well.
Shut up. Have you actually?
Yes, I have been.
I'm so excited by this.
I know, I'm excited too. So I have long taught a plot strategy that focuses on desire, the one true desire of your main character. It has to be external. It has to be singular. It has to function in a very specific way in order to generate the rest of the things we need, like conflict and subplot and theme. All of these things come back to desire. And I think quite often authors forget that their character just needs this one thing to drive them. And without it, it really is impossible to carry a narrative from start to finish without just blowing drastically off course.
How do we know when we found a desire significant enough for it to work?
I make all of my authors write a one-page summary of their entire novel. It has to have beginning, middle, and end. It doesn't have any emotion in it. It has no snatches of dialogue in it. It's you sitting down with a friend at a bar and being like, let me tell you this story. And boom, 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 you tell the story. So when the desire is strong enough, you should be able to generate that document with a lot of clarity, point to the beginning, the middle, and the end, and see the through line of how that desire morphs over the course of the novel. So it has to have enough meat on the bone to generate conflict, right? Conflict is the sort of formula for conflict is desire plus impediment to desire equals conflict. So the desire has to be something that can withstand impediment. At my workshop on plot in Sweden, a woman was telling me that her protagonist has two desires. She wants so badly to get this promotion, and she wants so badly to have a baby. And I said, you have confused her desire for a child with her desire for the one true desire can't be something around which she has not perfect control, right? Like I said, the desire for a baby and her infertility is part of your antagonistic forces. It's not her one true desire. It's already become an antagonist because it's been an ongoing struggle, right? So just because your character wants a thing does not make that thing the one true desire. But the job for this character gives rise to the impediment. You know, if nature is the impediment, right, to her fertility, that's not a great desire. You can't hang your hat on that. You can't build a whole plot around that because sometimes there's nothing you can do. And if that's the answer, if the answer is sometimes you just can't, that's a terrible primary desire. It's going to be a very boring book. So, you know, sometimes that desire is actually part of the antagonistic force that is the impediment. And that's fine too. But you just have to understand what parts of your narrative you're dealing with at any given time.
I love this. You have just jogged a little spark of an idea for something in my Gothic romance. So I'm in my, I don't know if I prefer drafting them, if that's my favorite bit is the drafting, or if it's the research and the outlining. But I think you've just unhooked something that I was like not stuck on, but like, you know, when you're like circling the drain a little bit and you're like, why is this not quite? Anyway, I think you just unhooked it. So thanks for that. Okay.
My pleasure.
What is the most common thing that you have to tell writers? Like, what drives you up the wall? Like, it's the advice you are like you have template text somewhere on your computer because you have to tell authors this so many times.
I mean, other than your character doesn't want anything badly enough, and other than that's not how you use a semicolon, I would say, in a very broad industry-wide perspective, I would say the thing I counsel authors about the most is patience with themselves, with their work. The idea of urgency does not produce good art. And so I think, you know, there are exceptions, right? People who are putting out 6 books a year because that's what is required for their bottom line. I think the authors I've worked with who are under that kind of pressure work best when they're extraordinarily organized and are actually publishing things that were written years ago, like 2 years. They're 2 years out from publication at all times.
Well, I also think authors that are at that point outsource an awful lot too. So actually a lot of their time isn't necessarily swept up with all the marketing or the actual production publishing process, but all they have to do is read more books and write more books. Like that's when they get to that point, you know.
I think that there's the necessity of time is really profound. I think creative burnout is real. I worry about my authors who say, well, I'm taking 2 weeks off and I'm going to bang out a draft. No, you're going to sit on the couch and watch reality TV for at least a week of that, because your brain can't just go from, everyday hustle to fabricating worlds in the blink of an eye. And if we could, the literary landscape would be very different. So I think people don't give themselves enough grace and enough time to understand that creativity is work and that you can't just, it's not an on-demand button, right? Creativity is not something that you can ignore for years and years and decades and then expect to turn on like a light bulb.
I'm very sad that we are at the end of our time.
I
I
know.
would talk to you for a whole another, well, 3 episodes. So when you finish your book, you'll have to let me know and you'll have to come back on to talk about it.
I will.
But this is the Rebel Author Podcast. So tell everyone about a time you unleashed your inner rebel.
It has nothing to do with books or editing. But when I met my husband in grad school at NYU, and we, started setting up our lives together, and we finished grad school and we had jobs, yada, yada, yada. And we decided somewhat abruptly that the rat race was going to put us in early graves. And so we moved out of New York. We moved to an abandoned beach town off the coast of New Jersey in the dead of winter. We lived in this house on stilts next to the dunes. It was just us on stilts and the dunes and then the frigid Atlantic Ocean. And I think the total population of this town in the winter is like 207 people. And from there, we used that as our home base to drive up and down the East Coast and decide where we wanted to live, totally irrespective of where our families were settled. Or my job has always been portable, but my then fiance was like, well, I'll just get a job wherever we like, So we kind of we were both raised with this very sort of traditional school, spouse, work kind of trajectory. And we said, pause. We should pause. Yeah. Well, I mean, eventually we got there, right? Like here I am living in suburbia with my 2 kids and a cat and, whatever. But we were on a path that was not going to bring happiness. And we were too young to be unhappy. And we decided.
I love the little sparkle in your eye when you talk about it. Like I can tell those memories are like full of joy and fun. I love
it was like a 27-hour drive from New Jersey to Miami. That was not maybe our best choice, but it's okay.
Oh, well, thank you so much for your time today. I'm so sad that we are at the end, but would you like to tell everyone where they can find out more about you? I don't know whether your services are open, but if they are, you can tell everybody about that. And I guess anything else that you would like to add.
You can find me on Instagram, always. My handle is Becca Faith Heyman, and that's where you can find a lot of First Line Frenzy content. You can find me on my website, which is RebeccaFaithEditorial.com, and you can find me on Readsy by searching for my name, and I can sort of be contacted on any of those platforms, really. The work I primarily do is developmental editing. I don't do line level edits anymore. I just am too old and tired. So developmental editing in all genres, save horror and sort of like extravagantly galactic sci-fi. I'm always willing to look at anything but that. But there's all that information is on my website, so I won't bore you with it now. And that's where I can be found.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. And of course, a giant thank you to all of the show's listeners and all of the show's patrons. If you would like to get early access to all of the episodes, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. I'm Sasha Black. You are listening to Rebecca Faith Heyman, and this was the Rebel Author Podcast.